So there's times when a loss differs from assumptions. Meaning this. These are the times you say, I don't understand why this happened. So the assumption's like a spiritual crisis, right? If God is good, then why? I don't understand why. If God is good, why did this happen? It's difficulty making meaning of a situation, trying to work through, trying to say, where's the good in this? How can I make meaning of it? How can I make sense of it? That is a natural thing your mind does to try to bring clarity to the loss, right? That's something that we naturally try to do, but we have a difficult time to saying, I can't make this make sense. And so it's learning to be okay with the moments where I can't make this make sense. It's learning to be okay with that moment and find yourself in it. Trouble accepting the reality of the loss, a preoccupation with the cause and the suffering that maybe someone went through or how the loss happened to where I can't get my mind off of this. It was so traumatic, the cause of this, or the feeling guilty. Maybe you felt like you were the cause of it, or there's something that you could have done differently, a preoccupation with that, the guilt and shame that comes with that. Or the reformation of a worldview. This changes the entire way that you look at the world because of this loss. You see the world completely different. And those are moments when a loss differs from the assumptions of life to say, man, I assumed life would go this way. I had this whole worldview of how things worked. But now that I faced this loss, or now that this relationship changed, man, I don't know if I can trust anybody. My worldview's changed. I don't know if, in a lot of my situations, it's like, man, can I trust Christians and churches again? Can I trust other pastors? And you start to go through all of that to say, man, this is reforming the way I even look at the world. So here are the things that you normally lost, and this is nothing just to go through, this is just a list, right? So these are the 5 losses: routine, structure, friendship, opportunity, and freedom. Every loss can be encompassed into these 5 things. You're losing, in any loss, you're losing one of these 5 things or all of these 5, or not 1 or 5, but you're losing 1 through 5 of these things: routine, structure, friendship, opportunity, and freedom. Okay, so this is another intervention that you can do later, another therapy. So I'll show you this here. So you have, at the top of the page, you can make a circle. You write about a recent or a loss that you're thinking about at the center of the page, and then you circle it. Then you contemplate other losses that have taken place that are related to the first and link them together. So in this example, loss of the grandfather that I was talking about. This loss happened too soon. This loss was tragic. Here one day, gone the next. This loss was a part of my childhood. And the thing that I'm grieving now, the reason why this loss still hurts, my children will never meet him in this life. My children will never meet him. That makes me really sad today, right now, because this is one of the greatest men ever. But also with this loss, I had a grieving grandmother. We were living with them. We had to find a new home. My grandmother gets remarried. Another man tries to fill that place of grandfather. He wants me to call him Pawpaw. Not going to happen. No, it's good. This man ended up being a jerk, right? Ended up taking advantage of my grandmother. The grandfather who was a great grandfather, who was an amazing man, who did so much for her, loved her, took great care of her, financially took great care of her, put her in a great place where she wouldn't have had to work another day in her life. This other man that came in took everything. So all of these loss factors, this is a good therapy to work through, because you're working through all of these things to say, I'm not just grieving the loss of my grandfather. I'm grieving with my grandmother. I'm grieving the change that had to happen in our life, because, man, I already told you, this is the house I still look at. I love that place. We lived there with them. we had a routine, right? Part of the 5 losses. We had a routine that we would go through every single day. And he was a big part of that. Routine changed. The place where we live changed. Our financial situation changed. The guy that I call Grandpa changed. All of that. Those are all of the things that I'm not just grieving the loss of grandfather. And this is what I really want to bring out of this therapy. You're not just grieving the one loss. And this helps you start to relate other things to this loss. So I'm grieving the type and proximity, like we talked about. This was too soon, and this was tragic. I'm grieving the age. Remember, all the pre-loss factors. I'm grieving what part of childhood I was in. And I was in, we'll talk about in a second, I was in the part of childhood to where there wasn't a finality in death. And so you thought, okay, eventually he comes back, right? Something like he's just gone for a little bit. This is just a trip. So this is a really, really good therapy to kind of work through, something to work through on your own. And so you can do this with different losses that you faced, okay? So contemplate other losses that have taken place that are related to the first and linked to it. Then we explore the process. I went back a page. So this model gives us a bird's eye view, helps us to see a bird's eye view, and it's not unheard of to feel more distress over the secondary loss than the primary loss in this example. So like I showed you, in this example, the secondary loss is what I circled in the bottom right-hand corner. I have felt more pain over the secondary loss than I felt over the primary. All right, so we're going to start working through life stages here, okay? 1 in 14 children in the United States will experience death of a parent or sibling by age 18. 1 in 5 experience loss of a close relative by age 15. The most common losses for children: death, divorce, moving homes, changing schools, deceased pets, and foster care, removal from a home to another home. Young children, sometimes they're the forgotten grievers, right? Sometimes they're forgotten in all of this process, and I want to get this information out because there's kids that obviously are not in this room right now that are experiencing grief in a heavy, heavy way, but unfortunately have either been forgotten about or we don't know how to help them. We don't know how to help them grieve, and so we avoid it completely. All right? So attending a funeral or burial are likely their first memories of loss. A death in the family affects a child, or the child will worry about, will their needs continue to be met because of this loss? Absolutely is what I felt as a child. The child will pick up on being left out because all these grown-ups are making all of these plans and all these changes. The child will feel like they're being left out. If their parent, even a life-related loss like a change of a job or moving, things like that, they feel left out of that process, and that's really hard on kids. Children want to be included as a full member of the family system. They want to, even though they are not making that decision to move, even though they're not making the decisions of how the funeral is going to look or any of that, they still want to be included as a full family member. And so there's things we try. We're not perfect parents, but we try, there's bigger decisions that we make to say, how can we include the kids in that decision and make them a part of it, right? They want to be a full family member. And children will then, like we brought out earlier, will fear additional losses. Once that initial loss has happened, they can go into that fearful, anxious attachment. The blood sugar, I don't know. I'm just kidding. So children will be fear additional losses. All right, let's work through these different age groups, okay? So a preschooler from 2 to 4 years old, they will have a sass. They will have a sass. We know that. They will have a sense of sadness for the loss. I see the time, it's 11:04. I've promised to be done by noon, and I know where I'm at, okay? So, they have a sense of sadness or loss, but they will lack in the vocabulary for emotional expression. They won't know how to say how they're feeling, as a lot of adults don't know how to say how they're feeling. They may act out to express the feelings because they can't say it vocally. They're going to act out. They may become excessively clingy. And that's really hard. If you're facing a loss as a family and you have a 2 or 3, 4-year-old that's just all over you, you're like, just get off my leg for a second. You just, go over there, go play, go be with your friends. And you're expecting them or wanting them just to just go on like nothing's happened, but they feel this too. They just don't know how to express it. They also see death as reversible. They don't understand yet the finality of death from 2 to 4 years old. We will likely have to explain the loss to a child multiple times. So don't get frustrated if they continue to ask where someone is or what happened. They will need to explain multiple times to work it out. This is completely normal. Kids are concrete thinkers, so our language with them should also be concrete. We should give children facts. Example, avoid using figurative language like this. We lost grandma, or grandma went home. The child immediately thinks, let's go find grandma. If grandma is lost, concrete thinking. If grandma is lost, let's go find her. Or grandma went home. Well, let's go to her house and see her. That's a child, concrete thinking. So we have to talk to them in concrete ways. So a lack of information can also be confusing to the children. And that's where we come to, we don't know how to explain it to them, so we just say, she's in a better place, or we lost her. So we can give the facts of a loss in a way that are developmentally appropriate to the child. They don't need the trauma of every detail of the loss. We can do it age appropriate, but still give them the facts of the loss. Your grandmother died. That's really hard to say, but it's a fact of the loss, and it's better for them because they think in concrete ways. It helps them go to the next step in their mind. There was a finality, and you will have to, it will hurt, and you won't like it, and you will get annoyed. You will have to say that half a dozen more times, over and over again. Allow the child to lead this. A child will ask when they are ready to understand. This is why you can be talking to a 4-year-old about something completely serious, and they ask this crazy theological or this worldview type of question or a loss-related question. They ask this big thing, and now you've got to explain this big moment to them, and you start explaining it to them, and then all of a sudden, as you're explaining, they just run off and go play. Or they're just like, okay, and they just move on. Okay? You stop. They'll ask another question again. They're going to ask as they can understand, okay? And sometimes we feel like we're in those big moments and we put high stakes on that one big moment of this is the moment that I'm explaining to them of how the world works. They don't need all that at once. They will ask as they're ready. And so allow the child to lead, and they will ask what they are ready to understand. And so you answer the question they are asking. And you can answer the question they're asking with the facts of the situation. That's what they really want, and ultimately that's what they need. And so in a case to where the facts of this, I'll say it again, in the case where the facts of the situation can be really, really traumatic, there are places in information to say they'll be ready for that part of the information later, but they need the fact of what happened. And that, not that we lost grandma, but grandma died. It's hard to say, but it's better for them. So grief response is an adaptation to loss for a school-age child. Acting out mistrust regarding safety. I don't know if I can be safe again. Attachment theory. A lack of concentration. Well, what's happened to my child all of a sudden? They have ADHD. They can't think. Intrusive thinking. They start thinking really bad things, like they want to do something bad, or intrusive thinking, or impulsive behavior. Psychosomatic complaints, like internal stress or conflict that they're having, like what? My child's trying to work through something, a stress or conflict. They will play out the loss, right? Allow them to do that. Don't stop them if they're in play, right? In that moment, you listen, because you're going to get all of the clues you need to hear. If they're in play and they're playing out the loss, don't say, no, don't do that, because you're probably fearful, avoidant in your attachment. You're probably saying, oh, don't do that. I don't want to experience that pain. I don't want you to experience the pain. No, let them play that out. If they're in play, or if they're imagining, let them play out the loss, right? That's so good for their brains. All right. They will go on a quest for the details, right? And so that's when, as they're on their quest, you answer their questions. This is something with adopting our girls. They're at different stages right now. One of them's just slowly on a quest for details about a biological mother. And so as the quest is going through, as the questions come, we answer the questions, and that's all we do. We answer the question, and then we go on, and another question will be asked later. There's a quest for the details, right? A hyper-vigilance or hypersensitivity to everything, not just related to the loss, or a social withdrawal. These are all things that kids will face. So let's go through these different age levels. So elementary school, 5 to 9 years old. At this age, children are great observers. However, they've not developed a full range of interpretive skills yet. So they see everything, but they don't know how to interpret in their minds. What am I really seeing right now? I'm seeing people upset. I'm seeing people angry. I'm seeing people frustrated. I'm seeing people crying. I'm seeing people heartbroken. I don't know what to do about that. I'm seeing all of that, but I don't know how to interpret it yet. As a result, they'll find gaps. They will find the gaps in As a result, they will fill in the gaps that we do not tell them. So that's why the facts of the situation are important. They will, if there's any gap, any human being does this. If there is a gap in the information, we will fill in the gap with our own assumptions of the situation, right? So kids do that too. It's common that their story is exceedingly more traumatizing than what actually happened, right? Most 5 to 9-year-olds are able to experience the full spectrum of emotions. They'll experience every emotion that's related to loss, right? They will assume responsibility for the loss. They're going to feel like somehow, some way, this was my fault. Somehow, some way, this was my fault. And they will begin to understand that death is irreversible. From 5 to 9 years old, they'll be in that process of this is irreversible. That's why I said when I was 6 years old, it was just in that middle section of, is he coming back? Is this really the end? Like, this can't be over yet. They're in that process. And then they will also express concern for others who are grieving. Allow your child or grandchild, or if you're helping somebody through it, allow that child to help comfort you. It's good for them too. Sometimes we want to be really, really strong for our kids, right? We want to be so strong for them. No. Allow them moments to actually be strong with you and for you too. They need that just as much as they need the help working through it, as much as they need the facts and they need the therapy themselves, just as much as they need that, they need moments to where they feel like they're actually contributing and helping too. That helps them helps them work through their grief, okay? As we get to the middle school years, that 10 to 13 years old, the adolescent and pre-adolescent, children at this age are able to view the loss from a social dimension, how it affects relationships. They will have a strong positive or negative response in times like if they're facing a divorce, with the parents in times of remarriage, they'll face really strong responses to losses like that. They'll be completely like for it, and this is the best thing ever to happen as things are being put back together, or they're going to completely hate it, right? There's going to be those strong emotions, positive or negative responses to that loss or to that change. They are most likely to be the ones that suppress their experience of loss so that they are not a burden to other grievers. And so they're going to be, that age group's most likely the ones to have moments where they're hiding away. I don't want to express all the feelings because I don't want to be just one more burden to the family. Continuing on. And high schoolers, 14 to 18 years old, they want to be included as an adult, period. Whether we think they're ready for that or they're an adult or not, this is what they're thinking. They want to be included as an adult. They want to be in that circle of conversation that's happening when the adults are trying to work through, or they're trying to make plans, or when the adults are working. They want to be in that circle. Sometimes it's not appropriate for that. Most of the time it is. So their questions will be more complicated and existential. They're going to be more philosophical questions, more worldview questions, more questions you're getting from them, and you're scratching your head too. I'm like, well, I haven't figured out that part of life yet either, right? So their questions are going to be more complicated. They will have a heightened interest in fairness and justice. They'll have a fixation to say, I'm going to fix this so this doesn't happen again. So if they lost a grandfather or a parent, they're saying, I'm going to go cure cancer, right? I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. They'll have a fixation on justice. If something happened, a car wreck or something like that, they're going to go down this path of saying, I'm going to make sure that no car wreck ever happens again, right? They'll have a fixation. I'm going to make sure no school shooting ever happens again, right? All of those things that these teenagers, this level, will fixate and say, there has to be justice for this. So any loss, that's what they'll do, a fixation on that. So they will have an increase in typical adolescent behavior. So you will just see they're already going to have mood swings. They're already going to be impulsive. They're already going to do risky things. They're already going to make bad decisions. You're just going to see more of it happen when they're grieving. And you're like, oh, that's something to look forward to. Okay, other helpful concepts for grieving children. So here's the other things that are helpful for kids. We allow activities that link the child to the deceased along with open communication. We want them to be able to have, when we talk to loss orientation in life, right? We want their oscillation to be good too. We want them to find that place in the middle to where they're able to move on with life and still great things for them, and they have an entire life ahead of them while they're able to also access the loss, right? So we want to allow activities that link the child to the deceased along with open communication that creates the best climate for the grieving child, and they report less depression in adulthood if we're able to help them as they're going through this as kids. And so the activities, it doesn't have to be something crazy. It can just be simple things that you're allowing them to be at the funeral, or you're allowing them to be a part of certain things like we talked about, allowing those moments to be part of the family. Those are really, in most cases, those are really good for children. Encourage a realistic, not idealized view of the deceased or the lost. That includes positive and negative attributes. And so one of the most common things I see in helping families through loss and especially funeral situations and things, there's a fixation on just the positive attributes of the person. And it's an avoidant of anything that could have been negative. I understand if you're in a memorial service, a funeral, that's not the time to bash on somebody who's passed away. That's not your moment in time, right? I understand that. But that fixation continues on with everything that is said and done. And this person has been elevated to an idolized level. Here's what happens. When a person is elevated to an idolized level, those children will never be able to meet the expectations that you put on them on that person. To say, if grandpa was perfect, or if uncle so-and-so was perfect, or whatever, this idolized view of this person, then the children will look at it and say, man, I want to be more like them, and they will never, ever reach it. They'll never, ever reach it. And so it's important in those moments, you're not betraying somebody to put them at a human level with you. To put them at a human level with you. And this is something I see so often. And I understand. I get it. It's a part of the grieving, and it's a part of not wanting to avoid certain pains. But it's okay if the person that you've lost, if there were things that were negative about their life or things that you don't want to continue in your family, it's okay if those things are said. It's okay with those things are said, or your kids will have an idolized expectation that they'll never be able to meet. Most want to be included in rituals simply because they are part of the family, not based on the understanding of death. They may not understand everything that's going on. They just want to be there and be included. Be prepared for moments of re-grieving, encountering the loss in a new way due to developmental maturity or rite of passage. So be ready. This will come up again. This is exactly the grandfather experience that I've had, right? Different stages of life brought different ways that I grieved the loss. I didn't grieve. I never for a moment considered my kids not meeting him when I didn't have kids. And so that became a new way of grief, right? So you've not lost your mind. You've not lost your mind if you're still grieving something that happened a long time ago.